The F-35 is expected to stay relevant for operators for decades to come, which means it's going to need upgrades. Driving those upgrades is the question of power and cooling. Right now, there's a competition about who's going to provide the next upgrade to that system. To kick off this roundtable, I asked Michael Mara, our air correspondent, about exactly why power and cooling is so important for the jet going forward.
Block 4, adding all these new capabilities, it's going to make the jet run hotter, also need more power to operate those things. For the Block 4 upgrade, the program is undertaking what's called the engine core upgrade, which is just an upgrade of the existing Pratt engine. That's going to provide enough support for Block 4, but beyond that, you're going to need even more cooling. And the Joint Program Office has set this goal of 80 kilowatts, which essentially means if you generate 80 kilowatts of heat, you need enough capacity to cool that down. And that's where they're looking at an upgrade for the current Power Thermal Management Unit, or PTMU. So I talked to Lockheed's program manager, Chauncey McIntosh, recently at AFA, and he said that they're looking at about a 2-year time frame to pick a new design. There's currently a competition going on right now between the incumbent Honeywell and Collins Aerospace. So the winner of that competition will essentially provide a new cooling solution to ensure that all these new upgrades can operate.
And that competition is being run through Lockheed?
Correct.
As opposed to the JPO?
Correct.
Okay. JD, how do we get here?
Well, there was an answer for this whole problem because the JPO looked at an entirely new engine. In fact, an entirely new engine technology. They had what was called the Adaptive Engine Technology Program, then it became the Adaptive Engine Transition Program, a competitive contract between Pratt and GE to do an entirely new technology of engine with an extra stream of air that would greatly increase both the range of the aircraft by about 30% and the cooling capacity. It came down to a decision on budget. Ultimately, it was decided that it was too expensive to develop these engines and pick one of them and retrofit them into F-35's. That technology has now moved on to the NGAD program with some different restrictions, fewer restrictions actually, because they're not limited to an F-35 size engine.
Sure. And to your point earlier about a Stovall F-35B, this was one of the main issues with getting a new adaptive engine to work, that you need to fit it in within the Stovall architecture, which there wasn't essentially a common solution between all three aircraft like there is with the current F-135 engine.
But one really important thing about that engine is it would have given the aircraft more range. And so it would have had yet another operational benefit if that would have been the road that the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Navy decided to go down.
Sure, but another thing that had to be considered is the international partners. Some of these countries are busting their budgets just to get the jet in the first place. How many of them would be willing to pay to re-engine it? Probably not that many.
And I think you're seeing similar arguments play out, and at least with the cooling system upgrade. If you go with the new architecture, do customers want to do that, or do they want to upgrade with the existing architecture? You have similar dynamics, but really the program wants to ensure that there is enough cooling, regardless of what the solution is.
How does this work logistically? If, say, the U.S. decides we're going to go ahead, Lockheed picks one of the two competitors, and they go ahead with this. Do the customers, the foreign customers, they have the option to just not go with that upgrade?
I mean, theoretically they could. The only problem is that if you break with the US on any major decision, you lose that economy of scale. Right. So it would be up to whichever customer decided not to do that and anyone else that they can get to go along with them. This is an international program, but the US is in the driver's seat.
And the central ethos of the program has been commonality. The way you keep sustainment costs down, and I know people think they're huge, but they're lower than they would have been, is by having everybody have the same airplane. As soon as you start stocking different parts, different part numbers according to country, that becomes a lot more complicated.
So we have the two competitors that Lockheed is looking at here. What do we know about the offerings?
The incumbent supplier Honeywell is pitching an upgrade to the existing architecture that they're saying is less invasive than a whole new design. You know, they call it moving around the guts of the airplane a little bit, adding a better way to push coolant liquid through the aircraft. Changes that they say will be able to leverage much of the existing architecture with some necessary changes. Collins is pitching an entirely new architecture with a system that they're calling EPACS, the Enhanced Power and Cooling System. So this is something that the company developed with a lot of internal investment, and they're trying to unseat Honeywell as the supplier, essentially. But for both of these companies, I think it's fair to say that there is a new budding commercial market in terms of cooling solutions that would be needed, and a new military market in terms of next generation aircraft. So I think regardless of what you see in terms of decision, it's not necessarily the end of the road for that technology.